The twin suns of the remote planet Corin 9 hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty colony. The humans who lived here were used to isolation. No other civilizations ventured this far into the edge of explored space. The settlement was small, just a scattering of domes and solar arrays. But life had a rhythm. Farmers tended hydroponic fields, engineers like Mara repaired machinery, and children played in the dusty courtyards. No one noticed the shadow first. High above the colony, hidden among the sparse clouds, a Sci-Fi scout ship drifted silently. Its sleek black hull reflected the fading sunlight, making it nearly invisible. The Sci-Fi were a species feared across thousands of planets. Legends spoke of them as hunters, who took pleasure in the chase, tracking prey across entire star systems. Civilizations that resisted them vanished without a trace. Their reputation alone was enough to make colonies panic. But here on Corin 9, no one suspected danger yet. It wasn't until the ship glided low and silently touched down in the northern plains that the first sense of unease reached the humans. At first, the colony's sensors registered it as a trading vessel, a rare visitor from distant systems. A few of the farmers even joked about it, imagining exotic goods and supplies. Mara, however, had a bad feeling. She had seen strange craft in orbit before, Sci-Fi or otherwise, and this one moved differently. No signals, no lights, no routine chatter. It was as if the ship itself were watching, waiting. She wandered toward the northern plains under the pretense of checking the hydroponic fields. But when she arrived, she noticed marks in the soil that made her pause. The lines were too precise to be natural, like something or someone had carefully traced a path across the ground. The shapes curved in ways no human hand would casually create, and they glowed faintly under the dying sunlight. Mara knelt and traced one with her gloved finger. Her stomach tightened. Whoever or whatever made these marks had a purpose. Back at the colony, small things began to go missing. Animals in the enclosures vanished overnight. Supply drones sent to survey the northern plains never returned. Even equipment left out in the open disappeared without a trace. Some of the colonists laughed it off at first, blaming mismanagement or technical failures. But Mara wasn't laughing. She had a sense growing in her chest, a quiet, cold certainty that they were being watched. The next morning, she convinced the colony leader, Jorin, to review the surveillance footage from the previous night. What they saw made their blood run cold. Shadows moved with unnatural speed. Strange silhouettes flitted between the domes, disappearing before the cameras could focus. The colony dogs barked endlessly at empty air, and drones buzzed in alarm before shutting down mid-flight. "They're here," Mara whispered. Jorin frowned, rubbing his temple. "Who? Traders?" Mara shook her head. "No, not traders, hunters." The word hung heavy between them. For years, stories of the Sci-Fi had circulated in whispers and old holologs, entire planets wiped out in hours. No warning, no mercy, only the faint trace of the hunter's presence, and then silence. By midday, tension spread through the colony like wildfire. Doors were bolted, weapons inspected, and patrols sent in cautious loops around the perimeter. The humans had no experience fighting species like the Sci-Fi. Their weapons were designed for mining disputes and defensive drills, not a battle against predators who had evolved to outsmart entire civilizations. Mara returned to the northern plains alone. She felt a pull, an instinct she didn't fully understand, driving her toward the ship. As she neared the landing site, the air seemed to grow heavier. A low hum thrummed underfoot, like the heartbeat of some massive creature beneath the soil. The ship itself seemed alive, its black surface shimmering faintly in response to her approach. She crouched behind a boulder, trying to make sense of the strange markings. Then she saw movement, quick, precise, and almost ghost-like. One of the Sci-Fi had emerged from the shadows, its slender form glinting with armor that seemed both organic and metallic. It paused, head cocked as if sniffing the air. Mara froze. The Zephyr's eyes, or what she assumed were eyes, glowed faint red. They scanned the ground, the air, and the perimeter. Every motion was deliberate, almost surgical. Then it moved again, faster than she could track. Her pulse raced, but she refused to make a sound. She had read the old records. Sci-Fi hunters could detect even the slightest hint of fear, hesitation, or heartbeats out of rhythm. Mara had to stay calm. She had to stay invisible. She watched as more hunters emerged, surveying the area with a precision that was almost eerie. There were no mistakes, no wasted movements. It was as if they were rehearsing some grand plan, a hunt she didn't yet understand. The most chilling part, none of them had engaged yet. None had attacked. They were patient, confident, and calculating. Mara realized something that made her stomach twist. They weren't afraid of the humans. They were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And yet, strangely, the humans had not noticed the full scale of the threat. The colony's defenses remained idle, the people unaware of how close they were to disaster. Mara's mind raced with possibilities. Could they fight? Could they survive? As the suns dipped below the horizon, the Xipher retreated just beyond the hills, disappearing into the shadows. Mara returned to the colony, her heart pounding. She knew what no one else seemed to understand. The hunters had arrived, and the game had begun. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the colony, the Xipher were watching, waiting, and planning their move. And Mara knew deep down that the humans were about to become prey, or strike back in ways no one could imagine. The edge of the galaxy had grown silent, too silent, and the hunters were ready. The colony woke to an uneasy quiet. The twin suns had barely risen over Corin 9 when Mara noticed the absence of birds and animals. The hydroponic fields that normally buzzed with tiny drones were strangely still. Something was wrong. Jorin, the colony leader, called an emergency meeting in the central dome. The colonists gathered, faces pale and anxious. Mara described what she had seen near the northern plains, the marks in the soil, the precision of the Xipher movements, and the eerie way they seemed to watch the humans without being seen. "They're not traders," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "They're hunters. And they know we're here." Murmurs filled the room. Some people shook their heads, refusing to believe it. "Stories," one man said. "Xipher are just myths. We're safe." Mara shook her head. "I've seen them. I've felt them. They're real, and they're coming closer." No one wanted to hear her warnings, but the colony had sensors, and soon they picked up movement at the edge of the plains. A group of figures approached, walking with slow, deliberate steps. At first they looked like traders, small in number, carrying equipment that gleamed in the morning light. The colonists breathed easier. Maybe Mara had been wrong. Then the lead figure stopped. Its head tilted, and Mara saw the red glow of its eyes. Panic rippled through the colony. "They're testing us," Mara whispered, watching how we react. The Xipher moved closer, and Jorin ordered the colony's limited defenses activated. Only a few energy turrets and handheld rifles were ready, barely enough to defend against a skilled predator. The Z4 leader raised a hand. A thin hum filled the air. The humans instinctively froze. Some felt paralyzed, as if the sound vibrated inside their bones. Then, without warning, the Xipher struck. The first attack was devastating. Drones exploded mid-flight, their circuits fried by an invisible energy pulse. The ground shook as a small turret malfunctioned, sending sparks flying. Panic erupted. Humans ran for cover while the Xipher moved with lethal precision, neutralizing defenses with minimal effort. Mara dove behind a boulder, heart racing. She watched as the hunters darted across the open plains, their movements almost too fast to follow. Each strike was calculated. No human escaped unscathed. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration of how quickly life could end against the Xipher. In the chaos, Mara noticed something unusual. The hunters didn't destroy everything. They focused on people and machinery that might resist them. Some energy nodes and equipment were left untouched, almost as if they were selectively choosing their targets. Her mind raced. Why spare certain things? Was it strategy or arrogance? She ducked into a small drainage tunnel to catch her breath. From the shadows, she saw a young engineer trapped on a ridge, surrounded by 3 Xipher hunters. Without thinking, Mara grabbed a nearby piece of scrap metal and hurled it. It struck one of the hunters, forcing it to shift its attention. The engineer ran, and Mara realized something shocking. The Xipher were not infallible. They could be distracted, even outsmarted, if humans acted quickly and cleverly. As the dust settled, Jorin tried to rally the colonists. "Get everyone to the bunkers, now." The colony's underground bunkers were cramped, but defensible. Families huddled together, listening to the distant hum of the Xipher surveying the area above. Outside, the hunters paused, almost as if they were communicating silently. Their precision was frightening, but their confidence, their overconfidence, hinted at a possible weakness. Mara and a small team ventured to the perimeter to assess the damage. The fields were decimated, drones destroyed, and several engineers were missing. But they found something else. One of the Zephyrs' fallen scouts, a small reconnaissance device. The colony had never been quieter. Corin 9's twin suns had disappeared below the horizon, and in the darkness, Mara moved through the underground bunkers like a shadow. The humans were safe for now, but only just. The Zephyr hunters had retreated to the northern plains, but Mara knew it was temporary. They were calculating, watching, learning. "We can't just hide forever," Mara whispered to Jorin, who nodded grimly. "We need to understand them. We need to find a weakness." The senior engineers gathered in the command dome, staring at the data they had recovered from the fallen Zephyr scout device. Mara had spent hours decoding it, interpreting the patterns and tracing the hunters' movements. The more she looked, the more she noticed something strange. The Zephyr relied on sequences. Every attack, every survey, every patrol followed a strict pattern. They adjusted slowly, always expecting the humans to respond in predictable ways. "They're good," Mara said, "better than anything we've faced before, but they're not perfect. They follow rules, patterns. If we can break those patterns, we can outsmart them." Jorin raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying humans could beat them?" Mara nodded. "Not yet, but we can fight back smarter. The hunters think they know us, they don't." The first step was simple observation. Mara and a small team of scouts began venturing out at night in small groups, studying the hunters from hidden vantage points. They marked the Zephyr patrol's routes, timing how long each hunter spent in specific zones, noting the moments when the predators communicated with each other through hums and gestures. One night, Mara crouched behind a rock ridge, watching a trio of hunters cross the plains. Their movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, but Mara noticed something tiny. One hunter paused longer than the others, flicking its wrist before moving. Another scanned the sky repeatedly, as if expecting something to happen above. These micro moments of hesitation, of attention split between multiple tasks, were gaps, openings humans could exploit. "Look," Mara whispered to the scout beside her. "They think they're flawless. But even the best hunters make small mistakes." The humans began testing their theories. Simple traps were set along predictable patrol paths, nets rigged with wires, light-emitting devices to confuse sensors, and small energy pulses to mimic movement. The Zephyr reacted, but they adapted slowly, never quickly enough to avoid all the tricks. Mara smiled quietly. Each small success was a spark of hope, but she also saw the danger. If the Zephyr realized humans were analyzing their behavior, they would change tactics immediately. The balance was delicate. One wrong move could cost lives. Meanwhile, Jorin organized the colony's limited resources. Engineers and miners converted farming tools into defensive weapons, while Mara improvised new gadgets from old circuits and energy nodes. The colony was becoming a quiet laboratory of ingenuity. Every human skill, from engineering to farming, was turned into a tool for survival. Mara stayed awake most nights, monitoring the plains with the recovered Zephyr device. Then she discovered something astonishing. A faint signal from the hunter's communication. It wasn't speech. It was patterned pulses, almost like Morse code, coordinating movements over long distances. The Zephyr relied on this link. Disable it, or interfere with it, and their precision could collapse. "This could change everything," Mara told Jorin. "If we can scramble their signals, we can disrupt their coordination. They'll still be strong, but their advantage will shrink." Jorin nodded. "Then we test it, carefully, one step at a time." The next evening, Mara and a small team executed a trial. Using a modified energy emitter, they created a pulse that mimicked a false signal. It wasn't enough to destroy the hunters, but enough to make them hesitate. One patrol veered off its path, another paused mid-step, and a small hunter faltered in its scan. Mara's heart raced. "It works," she whispered. "They're human, not gods. They make mistakes." That night, back in the bunkers, Mara explained the implications to the colony. "We don't have to outrun them. We don't have to fight them head-on. We need to think like them, trick them, force them into errors. They rely on rules and patterns. We're unpredictable. That's our strength. Some colonists still trembled in fear, but others began to see hope. Farmers trained in stealth. Children practiced hiding and moving silently. Engineers tinkered with devices that could lure the hunters into traps. Mara felt a surge of pride. Humans could adapt, improvise, and strike in ways the Xipher never expected. Outside, in the darkness, the Xipher watched. Mara imagined their glowing red eyes scanning the perimeter, unaware that their careful strategies were being studied, that their movements were predictable. The hunters were confident, arrogant even, and that confidence was their vulnerability. Mara looked at the stars beyond Corin 9, feeling the weight of the coming battle. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and inexperienced, but they had something the Xipher did not: creativity, ingenuity, and unpredictability. The first step had been observation. The second step would be action. Mara knew the next encounter would be deadly, but now, humans were preparing to strike back, not just survive. For the first time, she felt the thrill of hope in a situation that should have been hopeless. Somewhere out there, in the plains and shadows, the hunters were waiting. They thought they had the humans cornered. They had no idea that the colony was already planning its first move, and the game of predator and prey was about to shift. The night was colder than usual on Corin 9, the twin moons casting pale light over the colony. Shadows stretched across the plains, blending with the hills where the Xipher hunters waited. Mara crouched in the command dome, scanning the flickering monitors. Tonight, the humans would do something they had never done before. Strike back. The traps were set. Energy nets hummed quietly, ready to spring. Small devices disguised as rocks emitted false signals, designed to confuse the hunters' sensors. Every patrol route had been studied and predicted. Mara's pulse raced. If they failed, the humans would not survive the night. Jorin gathered the small strike team. Stay calm. Move quickly. Remember, their strength is precision. Our strength is surprise. Mara nodded, gripping her improvised pulse rifle. She had never fired a weapon in anger, but she had built this moment for weeks. Her hands were steady. Her mind sharp. From the command dome, Mara triggered the first diversion. A small drone rigged with a signal pulse buzzed toward the hills. Immediately the Xipher paused, scanning the plains, following the fake trail. Mara held her breath. It worked. One hunter broke formation, veering off to investigate. Another hesitated mid-step, flicking its wrist in confusion. Mara smiled quietly. They were human, after all. They could be tricked. The humans sprang into action. Using energy nets, Mara and two other engineers trapped a small group of hunters, immobilizing them temporarily. Sparks flew as alien armor met human ingenuity. The Xipher struggled, but the nets held. In the chaos, another hunter lunged toward the perimeter fence. Mara fired her pulse rifle, not to kill, but to disrupt its movements. The shot hit an energy node nearby, sending a shockwave that knocked the hunter off balance. It stumbled, and the humans had a precious moment to regroup. Jorin's voice came over the comms. "Hold your ground. Don't let them recover." The strike team moved with precision. Every trap, every pulse, every distraction was timed to perfection. Mara felt the adrenaline surge. For the first time, the humans weren't just hiding. They were fighting smart. But the Xipher were fast learners. Two hunters broke free from the nets, advancing with lethal speed. One went after Mara, moving almost too quickly to track. She dodged, rolled, and fired a series of pulses that forced it to retreat temporarily. Her heart pounded. This was no longer a simulation or practice. Lives were at stake. Then she noticed something strange. The hunters were communicating differently, gesturing rapidly and shifting their formations. They were trying to adapt, but their adaptation was predictable. Mara realized the Xipher were still relying on their patterns, even when disrupted. Using that knowledge, she signaled the team. They split into smaller units, luring the hunters into zones rigged with traps. One hunter stumbled into an energy web and crashed to the ground, sparks flying. Another tripped a pulse emitter, causing its sensors to flicker and malfunction. The humans were turning the tables. The Xipher, confident and arrogant, were beginning to panic. Small mistakes grew into bigger ones. Mara's team pressed the advantage, pushing the hunters back toward the hills. Amid the action, Mara noticed a lone hunter heading toward the colony's central dome, possibly to disable their command systems. She ran, firing pulses to slow it down. The hunter dodged and struck at a support beam, causing a shower of sparks. Mara ducked just in time, then kicked over a nearby crate, sending debris crashing into the hunter's path. It staggered. Mara seized the moment, firing a concentrated pulse that temporarily disabled its armor. The hunter fell to the ground, stunned but alive. She had never felt such exhilaration and fear all at once. Meanwhile, the rest of the colony moved swiftly, securing civilians and tending to minor injuries. Engineers worked on repairing damaged turrets, and scouts monitored the remaining Ziffer movements. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos, guided by human ingenuity and courage. By the time the first sun began to rise, the humans had managed to push the hunters back to the northern hills. The humans of Corin 9 had barely slept. Their victory from the previous night still felt surreal, tiny, fragile sparks of hope in a galaxy ruled by predators. Mara moved through the colony's bunkers, checking on patrol teams and supply lines. The energy nets had been repaired, the pulse devices recharged. For now, the humans were safe, but Mara knew it wouldn't last. From the command dome, the monitors lit up with movement across the northern plains. The Ziffor had returned, but this time it was not a small patrol. A fleet of hunters glided in from the horizon, sleek ships cutting through the dark sky, followed by dozens of ground units advancing like shadows over the plains. "They've brought reinforcements," Mara said quietly, her voice tense. Jorin's jaw tightened. "They underestimated us last night. Now they're bringing the full force." The humans scrambled into position. The colony's limited defenses were ready, but even with traps, pulse emitters, and improvised weapons, the odds were overwhelming. Every mind in the bunkers worked frantically. Engineers repaired drones, farmers loaded energy turrets, and scouts reported movements in real time. Mara crouched near a perimeter turret, checking its calibration. Her pulse raced. The Ziffer moved faster and more coordinated than ever, their red eyes scanning, calculating, adjusting. They had learned from last night. The first strike came like lightning. Ground units leapt over hills, landing with crushing force. Pulse blasters tore through the defenses, cutting down makeshift barricades. The humans responded immediately, triggering traps and detonating energy nets. Sparks and smoke filled the plains, turning night into chaos. Mara fired her pulse rifle at a charging Ziffer, hitting its armor just enough to force it off balance. Another hunter lunged at her flank, its movement almost too quick to track. She dodged, rolled, and activated a small trap, sending a jolt of energy through the ground. The hunter stumbled and crashed into a turret, which exploded in a shower of sparks. "Focus on the groups, not individuals." Jorin's voice rang over the comms. "Divide and confuse them." The humans had learned a key lesson. The Ziffer were dangerous individually, but their strength came from coordination. Break the flow, disrupt the formation, and the hunters became vulnerable. Mara and two engineers moved quickly, using the chaos to their advantage. They lured a small patrol toward a pulse emitter, disguised as a rock. As expected, the hunters hesitated, their sensors confused. One staggered into a net trap, sparks flying as the energy coursed through its armor. But the Ziffer adapted faster this time. Mara noticed the subtle changes, quick gestures, low hums, synchronized movements that indicated rapid communication. The hunters were learning, evolving in real time. A sudden explosion rocked the western perimeter. Mara looked up and saw a Ziffer leader breaking through defenses, heading straight for the colony's main dome. Panic surged. This one was faster, smarter, and stronger than any they had faced. "Intercept it," Jorin ordered. Mara sprinted toward the dome with two engineers. They deployed pulse emitters, forcing the leader to dodge repeatedly. Sparks flew as its claws scraped across the reinforced walls. Every second counted. Mara fired a concentrated pulse shot that hit the energy node near the Ziffor, causing a feedback surge. The hunter reeled back, stunned for a crucial moment. The engineers seized the opportunity, activating a series of traps that pinned it temporarily. "Good," Mara shouted, her chest heaving. "Keep it there." Outside, the battle raged. Humans pushed back where they could, luring hunters into traps, confusing sensors, and taking advantage of every mistake. Each Ziffer that fell fueled a growing belief. Humans could adapt, fight, and survive against the galaxy's deadliest predators, but it came at a cost. Some humans had been injured. Several patrol drones were destroyed. Mara knew the Ziffer had not yet committed fully. This was a test, a counterattack designed to probe weaknesses, gather information, and determine whether humans were worth eliminating completely. From the command dome, Mara observed a disturbing pattern. The Xyphor were dividing their attacks, probing multiple points at once. They had learned the humans' traps could slow them, but not stop them entirely. Jorin's voice broke through her thoughts. "We hold them here. We cannot let them breach the dome." Mara's mind raced. The humans had one advantage the Xyphor didn't expect: ingenuity. They could combine traps, weapons, and terrain in unpredictable ways. They could make the hunters hesitate, miscalculate, and falter. She signaled to a group of engineers. "Set up the decoy paths, use the old trenches, lead them into the false corridors, and activate the pulse nodes simultaneously." The plan worked. A squad of Xyphor ran into the decoys, caught in a web of traps that disrupted their movements and communication. Sparks, smoke, and loud hums filled the air as the hunters struggled to adapt. Mara watched, her pulse steady. Humans had turned confusion into a weapon. As dawn approached, the Xyphor began to retreat, regrouping at the edge of the plains. They were beaten back but not destroyed. Mara knew the next encounter would be even deadlier. The hunters had learned, adapted, and would return stronger. Jorin gathered the colony. "We survived the counterattack, but they will not stop. They will test us again, and we must be ready. Remember this, we are not helpless. We are humans. We adapt, we fight, and we can win." Mara looked toward the northern plains, where the Xyphor waited beyond the hills. The hunters' glowing red eyes were visible even at a distance, a silent reminder that the battle was far from over. But for the first time she felt a surge of confidence. Humans had survived a full counterattack from the galaxy's deadliest predators, and in their survival, Mara knew something important. The Xyphor underestimated humanity. The next fight would come. And this time the humans would be ready. The humans had survived the Xyphor's counterattack, but the colony was tense. Supplies were low, machines damaged, and the survivors were exhausted. Mara walked through the central dome, checking on patrol teams and engineers. Everyone's eyes held the same thought: the Xyphor would return. And this time they would be stronger, smarter, deadlier. But Mara had an idea, a plan that could turn the tide. Using the data recovered from the fallen scout device, she had been analyzing the Xyphor's communication patterns for days. Late into the night, she noticed something unusual. The hunters relied heavily on synchronized pulses to coordinate attacks. Their movements, even their reactions to traps, were guided by this system. Disrupt it and their coordination could collapse. She presented her findings to Jorin and the senior engineers. "We can scramble their communication," Mara said. "It won't destroy them, but it will make them unpredictable. They'll stumble, miscalculate, and panic. That's when we strike." Jorin considered her words carefully. "It's risky. If we fail, we'll only make them angrier. But if it works, we could turn the battle in our favor." The team worked through the night. Engineers modified energy nodes to emit interference pulses, designed to mimic and distort the Xyphor signals. Mara programmed the sequence, carefully timing it to target multiple patrols at once. The entire colony became a hive of activity. Silent footsteps, low hums, sparks flying, devices being activated and tested. Every human skill was pushed to its limit. By dawn, the pulse devices were ready. Mara and a strike team moved to the northern perimeter, placing decoys and additional nodes to lure the hunters into the trap. The colony watched anxiously as the Xyphor fleet reappeared on the horizon, their ships glinting in the early light. The hunters were confident, arrogant even. They expected the humans to panic just as before. Mara activated the first pulse. A low hum spread across the plains, reaching the Xyphor patrols. At first nothing seemed to happen. Then small movements faltered. One hunter paused mid-step, flicking its wrist rapidly. Another stumbled into a decoy net. Mara's pulse quickened. It was working. The humans struck. Using the chaos, they targeted isolated hunters, luring them into traps. Energy nets, pulse emitters, and improvised weapons worked in unison. Sparks and smoke filled the air as the Xyphor scrambled, their precision failing for the first time. Mara herself faced a Xyphor leader, a massive armored hunter moving with lethal intent. Normally it would have outpaced her instantly, but now it hesitated, its movements jerky and unpredictable. Mara fired a pulse at its energy node, disrupting the coordination further. The hunter stumbled, giving her the opening to trigger a nearby trap. A net shot out, wrapping the hunter in electrified wires. Sparks flew as it struggled, but it could not move. Around the colony, humans took advantage of the confusion. Patrols collided, some hunters tripping into one another, their strategies unraveling. Mara realized the full potential of their plan. The Xyphor had underestimated humans too much, relying on their own systems rather than instinct. Humans were proving that creativity could overcome raw power. Jorin's voice came over the comms. "Push them back. Keep them disoriented." The humans advanced carefully, each step coordinated. The Xyphor retreated toward the northern hills, still dangerous but unable to maintain their previous precision. Mara watched as more hunters were ensnared, immobilized or forced to stumble across traps. Then she noticed the Xyphor flagship hovering at the edge of the battle. Its presence alone was enough to cause fear. Thousands of tons of armored craft, carrying elite hunters and deadly weapons. Mara's chest tightened. This could end badly. The plains of Corin 9 were silent under the twin suns' pale light. The humans of the colony moved cautiously, their pulse still quick from the previous night's battle. Mara stood on a ridge overlooking the plains, scanning for signs of the Xyphor. The hunters had retreated, but she knew better than to believe the fight was over. "They'll be back," Jorin said behind her, his voice quiet but firm. "And they'll be stronger." Mara nodded. "But now we have the advantage. They don't expect humans to think like this. They've underestimated us at every turn." The humans had spent days repairing defenses, setting new traps and fortifying the colony. Engineers had reprogrammed drones into decoy units, moving unpredictably across the plains. Pulse devices were calibrated to scramble Xyphor communication over a wide area. Every human skill, from farming to engineering, had been repurposed for survival and for victory. As the Xyphor fleet appeared on the horizon, Mara's heart pounded. This time the hunters were not merely probing or testing, they were coming to reclaim dominance. The flagship led the attack, followed by squads of ground units descending with precise coordination. The humans held their breath. Mara gave the signal. Energy nets sprang from hidden positions, tripping the first wave of ground hunters. Pulse devices emitted chaotic signals, disrupting the coordination between squads. The Xyphor faltered immediately, their formations breaking. Jorin shouted orders. "Hit the patrols. Focus on confusion, then strike." The humans moved like shadows. Mara and her strike team darted between trenches and decoys, luring hunters into traps. Sparks and smoke filled the plains, as pulse emitters and improvised devices disabled one hunter after another. The Xyphor were strong, faster than humans, but their reliance on predictable coordination made them vulnerable. Mara focused on the flagship. Using data from the recovered scout device, she calculated a trajectory to force it into a narrow canyon near the colony. If successful, the humans could disable its systems and isolate the ground units. "Now," Mara whispered, the pulse devices activated simultaneously. The flagship's communication lines overloaded with false signals, sending its patrols into chaos. Hunters collided, misfired, and became ensnared in energy nets. Mara guided the final traps, triggering an energy surge that disabled part of the flagship's hull systems. Smoke and sparks erupted as the massive ship faltered, unable to coordinate its ground units. The humans pressed the advantage. Every Xyphor hunter immobilized was another victory. Mara led a small team into the plains, targeting isolated hunters and using pulse emitters to disrupt the rest. The once feared predators were now stumbling, disoriented and outmatched, not in strength but in ingenuity. Jorin's voice came over the comms, full of triumph. "Push them back. This is our fight now." The Xyphor, realizing their situation, began a controlled retreat. Mara and the humans didn't let up. Using decoys and traps, they forced the hunters back to the northern hills where the flagship hovered, crippled but still alive. The humans had won the battle, and the Xyphor had no choice but to retreat from the colony entirely. Silence fell over Corin 9. The plains were littered with the remnants of the conflict, scorched earth, disabled devices, and scattered Xyphor scouts. Mara walked through the aftermath, heart still racing. Around her, Humans were cheering quietly, helping the injured and repairing what they could. Jorin approached, placing a hand on Mara's shoulder. "We did it. Humanity has survived. And we've sent a message." Mara looked toward the horizon. In the distance, the Xi-4 fleet was disappearing among the stars, but the red glow of their eyes, seen in the scouts and distant ships, still lingered in memory. They had learned one thing. Humans were not prey to be underestimated. Word of the humans' resistance would spread. Mara knew that. Across the galaxy, other species would hear about Corin 9, about how humans had turned the tables on the galaxy's deadliest hunters. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and unyielding. They had survived when all odds were against them. Mara allowed herself a rare smile. The Xi-4 had underestimated humanity at every turn, thinking raw strength and precision would crush them, but humans had something the hunters could not understand fully: ingenuity, adaptability, and the courage to strike where no one expected. The colony began rebuilding, stronger than before. Traps were improved, weapons enhanced, and every human had learned a lesson in survival and strategy. Mara walked among her people, quietly proud of what they had achieved. As she gazed at the stars, a thought struck her. This victory was only the beginning. Humanity had earned a reputation now, a warning to anyone who thought humans were weak. The galaxy had learned that humans were not just survivors. They were fighters, hunters in their own right. Somewhere beyond the edge of explored space, Mara sensed that the Xi-4 would return one day. But the humans of Corin 9 were ready. They had turned fear into strategy, panic into precision, and desperation into triumph. The galaxy would never forget the day humans struck back, and Mara knew deep in her heart that the humans of Corin 9 and Earth itself had earned their place among the fiercest forces in the universe. The suns rose fully over the colony, casting warm light on the survivors. Corin 9 had endured. Humanity had triumphed. And the universe would never underestimate humans again.